So the method, the participants are Filipino immigrants, foreign nationals, government employees. The data analysis, it will be analytical instrument, correlation analysis, where data presentation will be utilized to process types of data, ensuring both descriptive and explanatory. So the sampling design is purpose sampling. Participants are deliberately selected based on predefined criteria to ensure direct first-hand experiential knowledge of migration regulation compliance issues and deportation risks. So the collection method are combination of interview and documentary sources available from the government websites. So for the literature review, I have more than five books that I have relied on. Some of these are the books from Orbeta, Jr. and Sosa, De Haas, Lindio, McGovern, Peralta, Ancho, and Pellegrina, and Parmanan. And in the literature review, I have discussed the structural dynamics, drivers, and governance of Filipino immigration and mobility, frameworks for migration governance and migration protection, overview of the Philippines immigration control and enforcement mechanism, social behavioral factors influencing migration decision and vulnerability to deportation, and current issues and challenges in migration governance. So let's proceed now for the in-depth discussion on data collection, analysis, and interpretation. So the respondent profile, there are 7 respondent profile. They can be categorically into 3: Filipino migrants, foreign nationals in the Philippines, and government employees. So first respondent is from Japan with a dependent visa. Second interviewee is from Canada. He is a naturalized Canadian citizen. Third is the permanent resident in Australia, and fourth is an employee or overseas Filipino worker with a working visa in United Arab Emirates. For the foreign nationals in the Philippines, one interviewee is a temporary residence visa and one is a working visa holder. For the government sector, is an immigration officer who provides enforcement, compliance, and handles departure and arrival formalities. So these are the 8 main overview of major findings. It can be categorized to migration drivers, compliance condition, risk dynamics, and reform ideas. So the first major finding is the motivation. Why do migrants migrate? Legal compliance. What are the compliances that they faces? Third is the barriers to compliance. What makes them difficult what are the challenges they have to overcome. Fourth is the employer sponsorship dynamics. Fifth is the influence of human factors. 6 is the role of intermediaries. 7 is the perception of deportation. And 3rd is the system improvement. So for the quantitative findings, Filipino immigrants from 2022 increased to 2023 and decreased in 2024. So this data illustrates that after the pandemic, the appetite of immigrants going abroad increased in 2023 but stabilizes in 2024. So from 2022, from 40,784, it increased. From 2022 from 40,784 to 2024 with 57,873. So as you can see, the annual growth since the opening of borders after the pandemic, it increased over 100%. So in 2023, it continues to slower down, and in 2024, it becomes stable. So this is not, the surge cannot be interpreted merely as an organic increase of domestic appetite of immigration, but rather it is an essential to understand that this phenomenon is called the compensatory mobility, where the immigrants' eagerness to migrate are being compensated for the backlogs or the delays of their journey or their plans to migrate. So for the overseas Filipino workers, also the same. It has increased in due time, but a highlight will be on the 2023, which increased to 116%, but a decline on 2024. So the rapid expansion in 2023 is also like a compensatory mobility in the sense that the people from the closed borders of other countries are slowly opening it up and making it the backlogs compensate for the migrants to go abroad. So this is just a graph of the increase from 2022 to 2024 of the overseas Filipino workers. So side by side, if we put them together, though the difference is in 1,000, we put it in an index value so that the comparison could be comparable. So as you can see, for the Filipino migrants, it's in this orange form, orange line. Though the overseas Filipino workers is still in the consistent, stronger in migration compared to the immigrants. So for foreign nationals, the same with the Filipino migrants and overseas Filipino workers, it continually increased also from 2022, a growth of 2.62. It lowers to 1.88%, then increased to 12%. So this indicates the Philippines opening of borders, inviting foreigners to go in the Philippines for migration. So let's proceed with the qualitative findings. Finding 1 is that migration decisions were driven by both structural and human factors. So economic factors were not the sole motivators for migration, and migration is an intergenerational strategy, meaning the family plans the migration, they consult their relatives, why they have to migrate, and what are the challenges and benefits that they will get from this journey. Second finding is the legal compliance was affected by information gaps and dependence on other actors. So information could come from variety sources, including government officials, employers, spouses, friends, and human resources. So this reliance on personal network highlights a common trend among migrants, the necessity of leveraging social connections. So they leverage the information through different types of person or different types of ways of getting the information. So this is a table wherein the sources of the information channel. So I have cited 5, and what are the compliances and vulnerabilities that it indicates. So if the information is from the official statutory or official government, the compliance or vulnerability is that information dispersed across multi-agency platforms can create cognitive barriers and obscure critical procedural updates. So this information is more of like more reliable compared to the other channel of information, such as the corporate institutional mediators, such as the HR, the friends or peer networks, commercial or bureaucratic proxies, and digital communication and social media platforms. Third finding is the bureaucratic burden as a significant barrier to maintaining legal status. So this extended processing times that can leave the individuals in a state of uncertainty, lack of clarity regarding the steps involved in the immigration process. The physical environment of these offices could be daunting and further aggravate the stress levels. So these are also the bureaucratic barriers. Example is the extended delay and time-based resistance. This affect in the compliance because it creates uncertainty and anxiety, particularly when an institutional delay paralyzes cross-border mobility and personal planning. So another finding is the legal status determines the level of deportation vulnerability. The risk of deportation for migrants is largely determined by their specific legal status. So the higher the legal status of an individual, the higher the safeguard they have, or the vulnerability they have is lower. So for an example, if an immigrant or if a foreigner has a citizenship, the level of security is very high. While if it is more of a tourist worker or a worker without a proper visa, it has a very level of security. So the deportation risk factor is minimal for those who are citizen or permanent, but very high on the tourist workers or workers without a proper visa. Another finding is the intermediaries can reduce risk, but they can also produce irregularities. So intermediaries such as employers, the government, play a crucial role in assisting migrants with their compliance requirements. So examining the legal status of migrants, the interview revealed that various intermediaries significantly influence migration compliance. So for an example, an intermediary like the employer, the risk-producing role is that migrants become dependent on employer action. So if it's more on the other intermediaries such as the recruiters or facilitators, it may encourage tourist worker schemes or coach answers. Another finding is that enforcement is necessary but discretion is limited. So immigration enforcement serves two essential roles. First is the protection measure for migrants. Second is ensuring compliance with established migration laws. So these officers have discretion, but they still have to enforce the law. Based on the interview with the immigration officer, he has mentioned these information issues such as the tourist worker scheme, which involves misrepresentation of a major compliance risk, and other issues such as deportation grants, which deportation risk is high when legal status is breached or employment is unauthorized. Another finding is the deportation risk is a process but not a single event. So the risk of deportation is not an abrupt occurrence but rather a gradual process that unfolds over time. It can commence at the moment of decision making when an individual makes choices regarding migration route. So in this graph, it can be categorized into three. So first is the entry factors, wherein the immigrants determines the motivation. He has now the information access. Then comes the second phase, which is the regulatory condition, which is the type of visas or legal status they will avail, the dependence on the intermediaries, then the bureaucratic burden. Then the third phase will be the outcome. It will be on the compliance stress, enforcement encounter, then the deportation risks. So as we can see in this graph, the journey for an migrant is a gradual and step-by-step process. So in this table, I have discussed the deportation risk. So low risk typical condition are the citizen, permanent residents, or those have more security in their status. While as for those high risk, those are individuals who have workers without permanent visa or other documentation. So I have also discussed the possible result. For low risk, it may be loss of employment or a delay in administration. For high risk, it will be enforcement actions such as deferred departure, deportation proceedings, or removal from one country. So the integration of qualitative with quantitative findings. So it is important that we compare, we give the qualitative findings compared with the quantitative findings. So as is in this table, I have discussed the findings on the quantitative and the qualitative, and what are the interpretation of this outcome. So for example, for outbound labor pressure in the quantitative, for qualitative, respondents highlight family economic goals. The interpretation is that macro-level export volumes establish a baseline vulnerability where compliance burden mandated by state are tailored by migrants before departure. So in this table, I have integrated the research motivation, as mentioned earlier, and what are the evidences that I have interpreted in chapter 4, and the integrated finding. For an example, for the first motivation is that how do government rules affect the migration journey and legal status? In chapter 4, it is the departure formality, visa categories, annual reporting, renewal, exit clearance, and deportation procedures. So the finding is that government frameworks evolve from initial stages of preparation to the active stages of enforcement, and they play a crucial role in defining the specific condition and requirement for legal residency. And for policy recommendation, I have 5 recommendations. First is to establish a unified migration information and compliance portal. Though each government agency has their portal, it is more practical to have one portal wherein the immigrant can access services through interagency services. Second is develop a notification system for visa expiration and compliance. One of the highlights of the interview is that the foreign national in the Philippines said that the government has no notification system, or they don't have the capacity to inform them of their visa status or the expiration of their visa. So he mentioned that in his country, government services such as availing of requirements from the Ministry of Education is like a Shopee platform. Third is the standardized and clarity of departure formalities. Though the Philippine government has its departure formalities since 2015, it is about time to clarify some gray areas and make it more feasible and simpler for the departing population. Fourth is to establish a humanitarian review procedure prior to deportation. So deportation is a stressful journey. Thus, the government needs to establish like a center or an intervention for this individual to have integration of what to expect in the process. Fifth is to improve case processing and reduce delays in deportation proceedings. So deportation can take years, and it takes also resources. So if the government can process more or immediately process deportation, it will be beneficial for the individual. At the same time, it will be more cost benefit for the government. And for area of further studies, I have 3. First is to evaluate the government integration programs, such as the interagency platform connection. Third is to study on the psychological and family impact of deportation, the deportee himself or herself, as well as the family that will have to undergo deportation. Third is to study on digital misinformation and migration decisions. So I think this one is on time for to fight misinformation and fake news in social platforms. And for conclusion, migration governance and human behaviors are closely linked. Establish legal frameworks from cross-border management, so it clearly actively engaged with these regulations. So efficient information needs to be underpinned by proactive digital information platforms. Third is to balance strategy to ensure that state sovereignty and human security are not in conflict, but rather a complementary foundation for safe, orderly, regular, and compassionate migration environment. Thank you.